Okay, so we know already, we discussed several times that 2023 was a record warm year. We don't exactly know how it got so warm. It was El Nino plus global warming, but it was much more than that. Maybe the Hangatonga underwater volcano in 2022 added, and indications are there that it did. Maybe cleaner air contributed to additional warming, and so on and so forth. There were wildfires which put out a lot of greenhouse gases, CO2, etc. as well. Let's look at 2024 just in terms of how much it cost to the world communities, societies. There are lives lost and livelihoods lost, properties, and then there is the GDP. So you have to be always careful on how you count the costs. And then there are exercises about attribution. There is a world weather attribution, something that keeps saying how each event got made more probable or more intense because of global warming, which are, I'm a bit skeptic about that, but nonetheless, here Christian Aid put out a report just now in December 2024 talking about the cost of 2024 in terms of climate hazards. A year of climate breakdown, Christian Aid again. This is flooding in Peshawar, Pakistan. I have discussed this in several podcasts. Basically, the Middle East and Mediterranean are warming rapidly, which have shifted the winds over the Arabian Sea, which is bringing heat waves and extreme rainfall over northwest India into Pakistan. And just to emphasize again, Pakistan has been flooded every year since 2010, and not just small floods, these are massive floods. Okay, so economic impacts are generally higher in absolute terms in high income countries. The economic value of infrastructure and homes tend to be higher, obviously. Living costs are greater and more is covered by insurance, and therefore calculable, because insurance companies are very, very particular about counting the costs. This is in terms of financial payouts they have to do. On the other hand, the death toll is usually higher in poorer countries because people don't have good houses and disaster management, early warnings. There's a litany of excuses as to why we are still having high number of deaths, mortality in developing countries. So this first list of the most expensive climate disasters in 2024 is therefore based on the latest information on losses from extreme weather published regularly by AON, because the information that is publicly available at the time of the writing only covers events from January to September. We have added to the list two recent catastrophic events that have not yet been analyzed by the company, namely Hurricane Milton and floods in Valencia, which really shocked the world, especially because this region has never seen such a flood in human memory. For these events, we have used comparable estimates from other companies, so RBC Capital for Hurricane Milton and Morningstar DBRS for Valencia floods. You can look up what those companies are, basically probably reinsurance industry, but doesn't matter. So there are other questions. Were these events forecasted? Were they forecasted correctly? If so, were all the actions taken? Why were the damages so high? And so on and so forth. But here we are going to focus more on just the damages. Most items on the list correspond to individual events, but in two instances, the China flood and the US storms, the entries refer to several China floods and US storms. The entries refer to several storms and flood events pooled together. In the case of the China floods, the item refers to events across the country that happened in June and July, so time and space average. In the US storms, we merged all storms classified by AON as severe convective storm and refers to the period between January and September. This does not include those storms classified as hurricanes, i.e. Hurricane Beryl, Hurricane Milton, and Hurricane Helen, because they are more than severe convective storms. But we'll look at those as well. As most of these estimates are based only on insured losses, the first set of events are unsurprisingly, storms and cyclones. If you get data from insurance companies, they're going to be, biased towards insured losses. The true financial costs are likely to be even higher, such as losses in crop production, delays in trading, while the human costs are often unaccounted. Okay, how do you value a life lost? You can say only 10 people died, or we can say India has reduced the number of deaths during cyclones and extreme events, but even one life is worth something. The second list, other notable climate disaster that in 2024 that we'll look at, examines more of the slower onset crises that can be just as deadly and more often in poorer countries, but for which less data is available. It's also important to note that the impacts and costs of climate events fall disproportionately on those living in poverty in lower income countries. This is because they will have fewer assets, less insurance, and generally poorer access to comprehensive public services. Okay, so at the end we'll look at some recommendations, but mostly it's quite hot. Let me turn on the fan. Yes, it is December 31st, and it's hot in Mumbai, which is unusual. Sorry about that. So what were the most expensive climate disasters of 2024? January to December. So you have US storms at 60 plus billion with 88 fatalities. 9 to 13 October is a particular event, Hurricane Milton in the US, which is a tropical cyclone, 25 deaths and 60 billion in damages. 25th to 28th September, Hurricane Helen, again US, Mexico, Cuba, got hit, 232 deaths with 55 billion in damages. And you can see easily that Cuba and Mexico would have had more deaths and lower damages because they are poorer countries, as we said. 9th June to 14th July, the China floods, 315 people dead, 15.6 billion in damages. 1st to 9th September, Typhoon Yagi, which hit several countries, Southwest Asia specifically, 829 plus, so still counting, 12.6 billion. So you can see damage is lower, deaths higher because of this developed country nature here. 1st to 11th July, Hurricane Beryl, US, Mexico, Caribbean islands, that's 76.7 billion in economic cost. 12th to 16th September, Storm Boris hit Central Europe, caused 26 fatalities at a loss of 5.2 billion. Okay, so 28th to April to 3rd May, Rio Grande Sul floods in Brazil, 183 people died and the cost was 5 billion. 1st to 7th June, Bavaria floods, 6 people died and 4.4 billion in losses. So again, number of deaths tends to be low in richer countries. 29th October, Valencia floods, 226 died. It was a horrific disaster, 4.22 billion in losses. This is Hurricane Milton in I think when it hit Florida. You can see a little strip mall getting drowned, a car that's just completely underwater and floating here. This is damage along the Pinellas County beaches from Hurricane Helen. Is extensive in neighborhoods all along the Gulf Boulevard. So you can see the massive damages here. Typhoon Yagi caused, I think it was the strongest typhoon of the record or some such thing. You can look up. Opava River, you can see the train got damaged there, train tracks, and of course lots of water flowing under and over. That's Rio Grande do Sul floods in Brazil. See the neighborhood street completely underwater. This is the Valencia after floods. A person empties a bucket full of mud taken from his house into the street. They have never seen such a thing, and they would never be ready for such a thing. Cars and debris in the street all over. You could see floating river of cars and vehicles coming down the street, and people were just flabbergasted. Okay, this is commuters facing difficulties in transportation due to flood flows caused by heavy downpour due to poor sewage system in Peshawar, Pakistan. So there is heavy rain, there is flooding, and then there is disaster management and infrastructure. So resilience and so on are still a far off dream. Other notable climate disasters that were not documented yet as of September: Philippines landslide January to February, or they were not insured losses. Southern Africa drought February to July. Colombia drought all year long. Gaza heat wave in April. Bangladesh heat wave in April and May. Gaza was, is under war, and it's a war zone, and obviously hospitals have been destroyed and people are living in all kinds of conditions. So heat wave and lack of water, health facilities can only make life miserable as hell. A flooded road in the city of Muharraq in the Kingdom of Bahrain. So UAE got hit, which is mentioned somewhere. The location is close to the Pearling Path, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's always sad when historical places get hit. Others not without a picture. East Antarctica got hit by a heat wave in July. West Africa floods August to September. Mayotte cyclone Chido in December. Okay, so what are the recommendations coming out of this Christian Aid report? As countries submit their nationally determined contributions in 2025, we need to see far more rapid carbon emissions cuts from rich polluting nations. These developed countries need to heed the warning from the International Energy Agency and the COP28 agreement in Dubai, and stop developing all new fossil fuel projects and divert the trillions of dollars of subsidies to supporting an energy transition and to climate adaptation both domestically and internationally. It's a very broad recommendation. How easy is it to implement and get rich countries to actually not only start reducing their emissions, mitigation, but also start to think of loss and damage. Okay. The process of submitting NDCs should also ensure the funding gaps faced by lower income countries are bridged so that they can mitigate and address climate impacts. The new collective quantified goal NCQG agreed at COP29 in Baku, I think, fell far short of providing the finance that is needed in 2025. While the nations need to agree to new forms of public finance, such as polluter pay and extreme wealth taxes, to provide the 1.3 trillion annual finance needed for the NCQG, which is the new collective quantified goal. The new fund for responding to loss and damage is now operational, but it's critically low in funding, with under 1 billion committed so far, as well as a big funding boost. It needs to demonstrate it can respond quickly and effectively to climate impacts which can't be adapted to. Okay, so there were two moves. One was responding to loss and damage and big funding boost, but news is not great. Okay, the unequal impact of climate disasters demonstrates the importance of adaptation to lower vulnerability before disasters strike. Whilst much progress has been made in reducing incidents of deaths, much more can be done to make communities more resilient, for example by investing in agroecology, which can withstand climate change better whilst helping to prevent emissions in the first place. They should form a key part of the global goal on adaptation, which is due to be agreed on in 2025. The global postcode lottery facing those experiencing climate disasters shows the importance of governments investing in effective social protection. These services are even more vital when homes and livelihoods have been damaged, and can help people recover dignity and agency, as well as practically providing income and wider economic benefits or social welfare networks. Rich countries have a vital role to ensure lower income country governments have more fiscal space to invest in social protection, though through debt relief, fairer international tax rules, mobilizing international climate finance and development aid. So poorer countries in general are just dealing with crises and no room in the budget for actually planning for the future, building resilience, adaptation, building back better after damage, and so on and so forth. The patchy data on the impacts of climate-related disasters in the global south highlights the importance of better data provision and gathering. It's particularly important to understand the totality of economic impacts in lower income countries where insurance-based estimates are often not available at all. Researchers should develop methodologies for analyzing the long-term impacts of climate-related disasters, including economic costs, so that a more comprehensive understanding of prevention, adaptation, and addressing losses is produced. This can contribute to a more needs-based approach to international climate finance. Eventually, rich countries are not completely insulated. They may build back better and they may have experience fewer deaths, but whatever happens in poorer countries eventually affects global supply chain, global labor force, terrorism, instabilities, conflicts, and so on and so forth. So we are all in this together. There's no doubt that we have to work together and bring everybody along to be more resilient, because as a species, we and other species with us are only as resilient as the weakest link in the system. So everybody has to be made resilient, weather ready, climate resilient, and so on. Okay, so let's leave it here. I'm going to post this ahead of line because it's kind of timely piece. I'm way behind, and hundreds of podcasts behind in posting, because I tend to post one per day and record about one per day, but this will take priority for now. Okay, see you. This will be under new findings in climate impacts. Okay, I'm under climate science course. I'm putting all these sections on new findings in AI, in solutions, in health, and impacts and modeling and so on. So this will be under impacts. Okay, see you in the next topic then.